Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar today. We are excited to have Bryce Menadue from Innovia Consulting joining us. And Bryce is going to be presenting on Hello Extensions Part 2. And before I pass it over to Bryce to cover on this topic, I would like to remind you that this session is being recorded and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those into the questions box and we will get them answered during our Q&A time at the end of our session. So now I'm going to pass it over to Bryce to kick off our presentation.
Thank you, Angie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bryce Menadue. I'm a NAV Business Central developer here at Innovia Consulting. And today we're going to be going over how to start and build and structure your first extension for Business Central. So without further ado, we'll hop into Visual Studio Code. Now, the first time you download and install this program, it's going to look pretty blank. So there's going to be a little bit of setup that's going to have to be required to get started. The first thing you're going to have to do is navigate over to this extensions pane, click on the little icon on the left. From there, you'll have to install something called the AL language. Just by typing in AL language, we can see it's the first one that pops up. And now this AL language is actually going to be its own extension within Visual Studio Code. So these extensions here is how I can enhance Visual Studio Code to be a better code editor. We can see that mine's already installed. It's saying, giving me the option to uninstall it if I wanted to. We do not want to do that. And besides the AL language itself from Microsoft, there are a plethora of other AL-based extensions that you can install. Some from Waldo, some from Mark Brummel, etc., all down the list here. Something this AL language extension is going to give us is an enhancement into our command palette. Now with Visual Studio Code, if I press a Control-Shift-P, it's going to launch my command palette, and we can see a whole bunch of these commands that have the letters AL in them. These are going to be specific commands that I can run that are going to help me build my extensions for Business Central. The one that we care about today is this AL go command, and this is how we're going to build our first extension. So one more time, it's going to be Control-Shift-P to launch the command palette, type in AL go, and I'm going to press enter. And now immediately it's going to give me a default directory of where I want to put this extension. We'll put it in my documents folder, within a folder called AL, but we're going to call this Hello Extensions Demo. And now this last folder, last directory level is actually important because this is going to be the name of the extension that gets defaulted in a file later on. So once I have the directory that I want, I'm going to go ahead and press enter. The next prompt is going to be for which platform we're going to be developing this against. In this case, we're going to be developing it for Business Central 2019, Release Wave 2, or Platform 4.0. So I click on that. Visual Studio Code is going to refresh. And now we can see on the left, I have some files that are automatically generated here. Moving ahead, the next prompt is going to be selecting a server. We're going to be doing this for a SaaS environment, so I'm going to choose the Microsoft Cloud Sandbox. And the first thing it's going to do is take me to my launch.json file. So some of these predefined files, we're going to have to modify a little bit here. Starting with the launch.json file, this is going to be how Visual Studio Code knows what to talk to, where I'm going to launch to. Starting from the top down, we're going to see the type is AL, and that's what we want it to be for Business Central extensions. The request is going to be to launch that program, but we're going to go ahead and modify the name. So the name is going to be completely cosmetic, meaning that this is only what I'm going to see and no literal name of any other environment or database or company on the tenant. Giving myself a new line right below that, I'm going to have to explicitly tell it what the sandbox name is, and the sandbox name will be whatever the name of the sandbox is on that tenant. I just happen to know mine is called sandbox because I looked ahead. These next two lines here, the startup object ID and startup object type, this is how you would launch to a specific page every time you go to launch it. These two lines we're not going to be needing for this demo, so we can go ahead and delete those two. Break on error we want to happen. We want it to launch the browser, and we want to set both of these to true. This enable long-running SQL statements and enable SQL information debugger. This will help for some development tools later on. And there's one more attribute we're going to add, and that's going to be the schema update mode. And we're going to give it the selection of force sync. What this is going to do for us is that if I make a destructive change or a table change or anything that would alter the database, it's going to force synchronize those changes as you would want in a development environment. Pushing ahead, we're going to look at the other JSON file, and this one's going to be the app.json file. You can think of this almost like the brains of the entire extension. This file is going to contain the ID of the extension, going to contain the name of the extension, publisher version, and more down below. We can go ahead and update the publisher right away. We'll say this is from Innovia Consulting. Version 1.0 is fine. You can give a brief description and then a full-on description. You can add a logo if you so desire. And then further down, you're going to see these dependencies here. For the last webinar, we talked a little bit about dependencies and why they're important. Well, with version 15 going forward, all extensions are now going to require you to be dependent on Microsoft's system application and base application. Below that, we can see what platform we're developing against, and we can have some ID ranges predefined if we so choose. In my case, I'm going to be developing in the 50 to 1,000 range. Keep my demo objects separate from my real objects. Go ahead and save this file. We can save my launch.json file. The next step I would have to do would be to download symbols. And this is where we're going to make Visual Studio Code reach out to the sandbox, reach out to the tenant, and get the symbols we need to start developing. We briefly touched on symbols in the last webinar, but these symbols are going to be these precompiled packages that are how we understand what the item table is, what the customer table is. This is so that our extension knows what to reference. We can right below the sandbox name add the tenant. And this is going to be the tenant ID. This is how Visual Studio Code knows for which tenant to reach out to. Paste that in there. And then going back to our command palette, Control-Shift-P, we can start typing in the word download, and we can see that first command up there is to download symbols. Pressing enter on that, see my output window pops up. It's going to authenticate me. It's going to send a request through an API to that tenant. I'm going to request those symbols. And shortly after, we can see that all symbol references has been downloaded. You would have to do this every time you would want to download a newer version of your symbols. If you updated from 15.0 to 15.1, 15.1 to 15.2, etc. And as we go forward, we'll have to download them in the future when newer releases come out. The next thing we can do is start structuring our extension appropriately. For demo's sake, we do not need this hello world file. This is an automatically generated file by Microsoft. Clean that up. We're going to delete that one. And I'm going to click in this file explorer here, make sure I click at the root level so I'm not in any of these folders already. And I'm going to add a new folder. And per Microsoft's practices, I'm going to add a root level folder called src, and this is going to stand for source. I'm going to go ahead and open up that source folder and add another folder. We're going to call this folder tables. Oh, excuse me, maybe I clicked the wrong thing. Give me a second here. Within the source table, within the source folder, add another folder called table. And also, have to excuse me, some technical difficulties here. Okay, without using the source table for this today, we're just going to go ahead and add a table folder. And then next to that, we're going to add what would be a page folder. These folders are going to help us organize what type of object we're going to be building or developing with. So the first thing we can do is open up my table folder, and we're going to add just a single file that's going to depict an object. And we're going to call this project demo.table.al. The naming convention here would be the object name, the object type, followed by the extension of AL. This is how VS Code knows it's going to be an AL file, that file extension. And now we can start building out our first table for Business Central. Now with the AL language extension that we installed earlier with Visual Studio Code, it's going to give me some tools to save me some time. So if I type in the letter T and then hit a control space, we can see a whole list of things that IntelliSense is going to try to give me. And now all I need is a table. So to follow the snippets correctly, we're going to do T and then table. And Waldo has built this out a snippet where I can press enter on this IntelliSense list item. And we can see the first structure of what would be a table in Business Central. You can see here my cursor is flashing over the ID. So we're going to start by typing in our table ID. I'm going to use 52,001. And if I tab over, I can start typing in my table name. The data classification of this table is going to be customer content. Keep tabbing down. I can start adding my table fields now. Each field is going to have to be within this fields curly brace area. The name of the first field we're just going to call code. I'm going to give our project a code, and we're going to make that of type code. And we'll say that's going to be 10 long as the data length. This code field is also going to be customer content. You can see by default that caption is going to fill in with that field name. That's with the aid of the snippet. But we're going to want some more fields on this table. So coming further down, I can start adding in more fields thanks to the help of snippets here. This will be ID of 2, and we're going to call this name. We're going to make this, how about a text? Instead of 50, we're going to do 100. Now, since I clicked off of this, my snippet started to fail on me, so I have to go and manually click around and enter in the rest of these properties here. We got code, name. We'll continue to add a description. That's going to be text of 2048. Text now supports 2048 characters with version 15. Below the description, we're going to go ahead and add a begin date. Oops, excuse me, I got ahead of myself. We need the ID before we need the field name. This will be field number 4. This can be called begin date. Could be a date type. Also customer content. One more field, and this is going to be, how about the end date? Content. Clean up some of our white space here. Going back up to the top, we can see some red squiggles over the name. Now, with every extension, you're going to have to build out an explicit permission set for your extension. This can be achieved very easily with the help of the command palette of the AL extension. So if I hit my Control-Shift-P again, and I start typing in the word permission, we can see there's a command to generate permission set containing the current extension objects. If I press enter on that, you get a notification in the bottom right letting you know that this is happening. And then if we look back in our File Explorer, we can see this new XML file that is my extension's permission set. It'll tell me my object type, ID, and then the permission of read, insert, modify, delete, and execute. And you'll have to do this with every time that you add a new table, not necessarily a table extension. We go ahead and save this. We'll let Visual Studio Code catch up because now that error message should go away. In the meantime, we're going to need a way to look at all this data. So if we quick navigate over to our page folder here, we can add a new page, and we're going to call this page project demo list.page.al. And now, just like achieved with the table, we can use our snippets to build out a page outline. So we'll start with the letter T, P-A-G. We can see all my IntelliSense is picking up here, and we're going to use this snippet here. Pressing enter, you can now see the whole structure of the page predefined. Following the 52,000 pattern, we're going to go ahead with 52,001 for my page. We'll call this INVC project demo list. We're going to give this a caption of project list to keep it clean, and this is in fact going to be a list type. Application area to all. Usage category will make into a list, and the source table is going to be INVC project demo. Perfect, no red squiggles up here. And now, being a list page instead of a group, we're going to want a repeater. This is going to be general type. And now I can start adding some of my fields to this list page. First one we're going to go ahead and add is going to be my code. IntelliSense is picking up my new code field based on that source table. So pressing enter there will give me the page field name and then the actual source table field name. No need to add a caption since it's already defined at the table level. Just set the application area to all. And let's add a few more to this, why not? So another new line, letter T, PAG field. You can see my IntelliSense picks up that snippet there. Press enter. I'm going to add the name right next to it. Letting IntelliSense pick up the name. Here's my next field. Going down a little further, let's add in that description. Looks good. We'll add in that begin and end date while we're at it. Oops. IntelliSense wants me to start writing a begin and end statement. I do not want to do that. Here's my begin date. And here's going to be my end date. And by default, the snippets are going to add in these actions, but in this case scenario, we're not going to be using actions. So we can go ahead and clean that up since it's not being used. One last thing I forgot to do is we're going to want to have insert allowed equal to true, so we can make new records on the fly right from the list page. Now we have a table and a page to deploy out to Business Central. And we're all going to cross our fingers, and I'm going to press the command F5, and this should deploy out to our sandbox. We can see the debug console is talking to the API, talking to Business Central. And one last message saying success, the package Innovia Consulting Hello Extensions demo has been published to the server. So I'm brought over to Chrome with a new tab that's opened up, and I'm going to go ahead and log into this account. Business Central is opening. Microsoft servers are taking their time. And in just a moment here, there's my homepage. We can see that I'm in fact in the sandbox for this tenant. Hopping up to the search bar, if I start typing in project, we can see my project list. Not quite sure why two of them show up, but here is now the list page that I made, and we're going to be making a new record. Here I can add my demo project, and we're going to say this is going to begin today and that it's going to end next month this time. That's going to conclude this high-level demonstration of your first extension. At this time, I'd like to open up to any questions.
Thank you, Bryce. Yes, we do have one question that came through. When will you be doing a continuation of this topic?
Good question, Angie. There is actually the next part of Hello Extensions that is scheduled for February 18th, so just a few weeks away.
All right, thank you. If anybody has any questions for Bryce that you would like to have him answer now, please go ahead and type those into the questions box, or you can feel free to contact one of your account managers, or if you would like to contact him, I believe he has his information up on the next slide. You can certainly do that as well. So thank you, Bryce, for presenting today, and to everyone on today's call, or if you're watching on demand, we want to thank you for joining us. And to let you know, we do have a few more webinars coming soon. Next week on February 6th, we have ClickLearn presenting on From Zero to E-Learning in 1 hour on Business Central. And then on February 11th, we have ADP presenting on the flexibility of technology with an integrated HCM solution. So check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's innovia.com/events. And I also want to let you know about our podcast that is going on. If you have not heard of the Innovia conversation already, we encourage you to listen to the selection that Steve and Jeff have provided to us over the last year. They do about 2 episodes per month, and you can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So check out the selection and subscribe so you will be notified when those new episodes air. And I also want to let you know about Innovia's annual customer conference. It's coming up on May 20th and 21st here in South Bend, Indiana, and it's going to be at Notre Dame. So contact your rep or visit our conference page where we have all the details for our conference, and that's innovia.com/conferences. This is a free event to attend, and we would love to have you there. So please register so you don't miss out on this great event. All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on another Innovia webinar. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks, Bryce.